Hello everyone. Right now, you're probably doing what most of us do, trying to make life work using the best logic, the best advice, and the best strategies you can find. You make lists, you weigh pros and cons, you ask the smartest person you know, you Google things at 2 a.m. Like, how to know if I'm making the right decision. But even with all that effort, things still fall apart, don't they? That's where you are right now. You had a plan. It made sense. The numbers lined up. The people agreed. You told yourself, this is wise, this is solid, so you stepped forward with confidence. And then, slowly, unexpected delays, a door that should have opened, slammed shut, a trusted voice suddenly silent, and your perfect plan begins to dissolve in your hands like paper in the rain. You sit on the edge of your bed and ask, what did I miss? I did everything right. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe you were relying on right more than on God. You think of Solomon, the man who literally asked God for wisdom instead of riches or power. And what was God's response? He delighted in that request, not because Solomon was clever, but because he was humble, because he knew what he didn't know. But you tried to know everything. You tried to predict and control it all. And now here you are, still confused, still wondering why common sense didn't lead to clarity. It's because wisdom is not just about being smart. It's about seeing through God's eyes. You read a story once about a brilliant CEO who built a multi-million-dollar company, then walked away from it after a single dream and prayer, warning him of collapse. Everyone mocked him, until 6 months later, the entire industry crashed. He wasn't smarter, he was just listening. Right now you're not listening. You're panicking. You're scanning for the next podcast, the next article, the next person to tell you what to do. But you haven't yet stopped to ask, Lord, what do you want? And honestly, that question terrifies you. Because you know it might lead you somewhere unexpected, somewhere uncomfortable, somewhere that feels more like losing control than gaining it. But here's the truth. That's where wisdom lives. In 1956, 5 young missionaries landed in Ecuador, determined to share the gospel with a remote tribe. Logic screamed, "Don't go." Wisdom, God's wisdom, said yes. It cost them their lives, but led to a legacy that brought hope to generations and transformed an entire people group. And now you're starting to see it. The plans that looked flawless on paper, they were missing something invisible. They were missing discernment. You stand in the kitchen, staring at the coffee brewing, and whisper, God, if my ideas aren't your ideas, take them. It's quiet, but something stirs. Maybe for the first time in a long time, you're finally facing the truth, that wisdom doesn't begin with confidence. It begins with reverence, with surrender, with humility. The world says, you've got this, but God says, you need me. And that isn't weakness. It's the first step toward seeing clearly. So you stop trying to figure it all out. You breathe, and you say, God, I'm ready to see differently now, even if it means unlearning everything you thought you knew. You used to believe that if you gathered enough information, you'd be safe. That knowledge was a kind of armor, layers and layers of research, advice, and common sense that would keep you from making the wrong move. But then came the decision that shattered all that. You made the best choice you knew how. You weighed the risk. You trusted the numbers. You even asked for input from people older and wiser than you, and it still blew up. The job that promised stability laid you off. The relationship you invested in fell apart. The project you poured yourself into crumbled without warning, and you felt embarrassed, ashamed, foolish. You thought, I'm supposed to be smarter than this. But maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about smarts. Maybe this was about humility. Remember King Uzziah, brilliant military leader, blessed by God, admired by his people. But when his heart grew proud, he entered the temple to burn incense, something only priests were allowed to do. It seemed like a small thing, but that act of pride led to his downfall. Wisdom had left the room the moment pride walked in. So you begin to realize something uncomfortable. You've been asking for clarity, but not for character. You've been chasing results, but not the refiner. You've asked God to bless your plans, without asking Him to shape your heart. Wisdom from God isn't just information, it's transformation, and transformation hurts. It requires letting go of your self-image as the capable one, the one who always knows what to do. It requires admitting, God, I thought I was wise, but maybe I've just been afraid. In 1890s China, there was a missionary named Gladys Aylward. She had no formal education and was rejected by multiple missions boards, but she felt God call her, so she bought a one-way ticket and went alone. Everyone said she was foolish, but over time, she became a powerful witness to thousands, even saving orphans during war. Wisdom looked like weakness, but it was led by God.
And now here you are, standing in the ashes of your well-intentioned mistake. And instead of scrambling to rebuild in your own strength, you pause, you breathe, you whisper, God, I don't want to just do what looks smart. I want to do what's right in your eyes. There's a soft shift inside you, like the difference between tension and trust, like letting your shoulders drop for the first time in days. You begin to look at your past not as a record of failures, but as a roadmap of grace. Ever heard the story of the man who tried to build a giant floating sculpture in the middle of a lake, convinced it would reveal the secrets of the universe? Years of work, millions of dollars, dozens of followers, and when it finally launched, it sank in 30 seconds. No one saw him again, not because he failed, but because he didn't listen. You don't want that to be your story. You want to hear God before the structure falls. So you do something simple and strange. You get on your knees. You say, God, strip me of what I think I know and replace it with what you know. And suddenly, the panic begins to drain. Not because you know more, but because you finally trust the one who knows it all. That's where wisdom begins. Not in certainty, but in surrender. You rise, not stronger in your own logic, but softer in your spirit. And that softness? That's where the real clarity starts to grow. You didn't expect the Bible to speak to you like this. Honestly, it had always felt a little intimidating, like a puzzle you weren't smart enough to solve. You'd skim pages, you'd hear verses in sermons, but it never hit you, not like this. Now, though, you sit with it open in your lap, not as a scholar, not as a skeptic, but as someone hungry. And suddenly, the words move. Not literally, of course, but it feels like they do. They rise from the page and press into your soul like fingers on your chest. They whisper things you didn't even know you needed to hear. The Bible isn't just an old book. It's breath. It's a light in the fog. It doesn't flatter, it cuts, but it also heals. You read about people who made massive mistakes, people who trusted the wrong kings, chased the wrong dreams, clung to the wrong logic, and yet God met them. Over and over again. Like Gideon, so unsure of himself, hiding in a wine press, God calls him a mighty warrior. He protests, he doesn't believe it. But God doesn't need his confidence, he needs his obedience. You pause at that word, obedience. Not analysis, not opinions, not control, just obedience. You've been trying to map every outcome. What if you just moved when God said go? What if you just waited when he said pause? You feel it now, how wisdom isn't just making the right choice, it's about making a righteous one. There was a young woman during World War II who lived in a quiet village. Her family hid refugees in the cellar. She was scared every single day, but she prayed. And one night, she had a dream that a patrol would search the house the next morning. So they moved everyone to the woods. Hours later, soldiers arrived. But the cellar was empty. They never found them. Her name never made the papers. But heaven knew her name. That kind of wisdom, it didn't come from a university. It came from kneeling. So now you begin to do the same. You don't just read the Bible. You ask it to read you. You pray before you open it. You say, God, show me what I've been missing. You expect more than facts. You expect formation. And God answers, maybe not in fireworks, but in slow, steady, sacred nudges. There's a man you once read about who spent years building a nonprofit from scratch until one day, in prayer, he heard God tell him to walk away. Everyone said he was crazy, but he obeyed. A year later, that organization was swept up in a scandal that would have destroyed his name. God had rescued him before the storm even began. Wisdom is like that. It's not flashy, it's protective.
And now, when you read about David or Ruth or Joseph or Esther, they're not just characters, they're reflections. You see your doubt in theirs. You see your longing in their waiting. You start asking questions that don't have easy answers, like, what if the wise choice is the hardest one? Or, what if God's direction leads me away from comfort? Or, am I willing to follow, even when it doesn't make sense? And those questions, they don't crush you anymore. They clarify you, because you're beginning to see that wisdom isn't a loud voice. It's a quiet confidence in God's presence. You no longer pray for easy choices. You pray for eyes to see clearly. You start to trust that the Bible isn't just full of rules. It's full of rhythms for living, patterns of humility, postures of surrender. And you finally understand something that used to sound like a cliché. God's ways really are higher than ours. And when you lean into them, everything changes. You're not sure exactly when it happened, but one day, you looked in the mirror and realized you're no longer chasing control. Something softer has taken its place. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And it doesn't come from diplomas or accolades or applause. It comes from a quiet resolve that says, even if I don't understand, I will trust. You think about Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. He asked for wisdom, not wealth or long life, and God gave it to him. But even Solomon strayed when he stopped listening. Wisdom isn't something you earn once and keep forever. It's something you return to daily. Like manna, like mercy. You used to think, the more you grew in faith, the fewer questions you'd have. Now you see it's the opposite. The closer you draw to God, the more willing you are to say, I don't know. And the more you say that, the more peace you feel. Real wisdom has never been about answers. It's about awareness of God's presence, His pace, His priorities. You've stopped obsessing over quick decisions. You've started asking different kinds of questions. Not, what will this get me? But, who will this make me? There's a missionary in Africa who gave up a tenured teaching position at a prestigious university. No one understood it. He said God told him to go serve where there was no clean water. He built wells for over 40 villages before he died of malaria. When asked if he had any regrets, his final words were, only that I can't do more. That's what wisdom looks like now. To you, it's not flashy, it's not famous, it's not even always successful by the world's standards, but it's faithful. You remember a weird little moment last week, waiting in traffic, watching a man on the corner give away free sandwiches. No signs, no tips, just kindness. And you felt it, deep in your spirit. That's what wisdom looks like. Obedience in the ordinary. There's a man in your town who volunteers at the hospital every Wednesday. He sits with people who have no visitors. He never posts about it. You only found out by accident. When you asked him why he does it, he smiled and said, because someone once did it for me. It's quiet, it's holy, it's wise. And now you're starting to live that way too. You wake up and ask, God, what do you want me to see today? Where should I go? What should I release? What should I hold on to? And slowly the anxiety fades. Not because you know what's next, but because you finally know who goes before you. There's a man in the Old Testament who walked with God for 300 years, Enoch. The Bible says he walked with God, and then he was no more. That's it. No resume, no biography, just a walk. And God thought it was beautiful. That's the kind of wisdom you're asking for now. Not to impress, but to endure. Not to be right, but to be righteous. You used to think wisdom was a destination. Now you see, it's a direction. And as long as you're walking with Him, you're already on the right path. So now, take a breath. Let everything you've heard settle softly across your heart, like dew on morning grass. This isn't a story that ends with clarity, but with comfort. You've learned that wisdom doesn't always shout or shine. It doesn't demand headlines or honor rolls. It often walks in unnoticed, wrapped in humility, carried by trust. You've seen that it's not about mastering life, but surrendering it. You've walked through days where everything felt uncertain, when logic failed, plans fell through, and voices around you grew loud with panic. And still, God was there, whispering, steadying, inviting you deeper. Now you know. You don't need to understand to be secure. You don't need to be perfect to be led. You don't need all the answers, just a heart that listens. Wisdom, you found, is not about lifting yourself up. It's about lowering yourself before the one who sees it all. And in that surrender, you are held. Not by control, not by knowledge, but by grace. So let your soul breathe again. Let go of every performance, every anxious checklist, every desperate attempt to prove yourself. Let your heart return to stillness, to the quiet confidence that God gives wisdom generously to all who ask in faith. So now, as you sit in this moment, let the noise fall away. Let the striving fade. Let the presence of God become the only thing that matters. And as the light dims and the story closes, you are not alone. You are guided, you are loved, and you are being made wise. Not by your strength, but by His. Let your soul rest. Let your breath slow. Let peace wrap around you like a warm, invisible cloak. You've heard the story. Now, let it live in you.